The Horus Heresy board game, which was originally released by Games Workshop in 1993, is a two-player, grand-scale wargame recreating the cinematic Siege of Terra from the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and is first previewed in White Dwarf Edition 161, released in May of the same year. Now, the premise is something that many of us are familiar with. Set during the 31st millennium, the Warmaster Horus turns traitor against his father, the Emperor of mankind. The Warmaster leads a corrupted coalition of Primarchs, Chaos Space Marines, Titans, and mutant cultists, launching a massive planetary assault directly onto Earth, or Terra as we now know it, to slay the Emperor inside the heavily fortified Imperial Palace before loyalist reinforcements can arrive. Horus Heresy the War Game was created by Jervis Johnson, and Bill King created a historical overview of the campaign and its titanic battles. At that point in GW's history, Citadel miniatures were used to recreate individual battles, whereas the War Game series games concentrated on entire campaigns involving hundreds of thousands or even millions of men. Such vast conflicts were impossible to recreate on the tabletop unless your collection of Citadel miniatures runs into thousands of models. And so the Wargame series uses a colourful map board and sets of cardboard counters to recreate this conflict. For Horus Heresy, the design team decided to look at what is without doubt the single most important campaign in the history of the Imperium, the Battle for Earth. That's right, the Battle for Earth and not Terra, as we now know it. The game map shows the terrain over which the campaign took place, while each counter represents a unit of troops rather than an individual soldier. The scale of the map and the size of the units represented by the counters can vary. For example, in Warmaster, the free game in issue 161 of White Dwarf, the map shows Horus's spaceship and each counter represents a full company of troops. In Horus Heresy, on the other hand, the map shows the Emperor's palace and the surrounding spaceports and fortresses. These cover an area of several hundred square miles, and each counter represents a complete Imperial Guard army or an entire Space Marine chapter. Horus Heresy begins at the start of the Battle for Earth, just as Horus's invasion force lands on the planet. One player commands the traitor forces led by Horus. Under his command are all of the units that fought in the campaign. Traitor Space Marine chapters, foul demonic hordes, enormous chaos war engines, and much more. The other player commands the loyal Imperial forces defending the Imperial Palace, including 3 full chapters of Space Marines and an equal number of Titan legions, as well as a numerous Imperial Guard armies and tank divisions. The game is split into 5 turns, each of which represents about 2 weeks of the campaign. At the start of each turn, you decide on a plan for your army by picking 2 strategy cards, which list your tactical options. If, for example, you had a movement and combat card, you could move and then attack with your counters. Once both players have chosen their cards, they each roll a d6. Whoever scores highest wins the initiative and goes first, flipping over the top card in his stack of strategy cards and carrying out the 2 phases listed on the card in the order shown. And then his opponent then flips over his top card and so on. Now, the game board is divided into a number of different sized areas, and each counter is given a movement value, which shows how many areas it can move in a turn. Most units have a movement value of 1, while swiftly moving units such as disc riders can have a movement value as high as 4 or even more. In addition, each counter is rated for its ability to attack and defend. For example, the 9th Terran Army, an Imperial Guard unit, has an attack value of 2 and a defence value of 4, showing that it's better on the defensive than when ordered to attack. A unit of Khorne Juggers, on the other hand, has an attack value of 6 and a defence value of 3, as befits troops that are famed for the devastating charge that they deliver. Combat is resolved by comparing the strengths of each side's counters and then rolling a dice on a special combat result table that's included within the game. Due to the fact that the Chaos Forces can land anywhere on the map at the start of the game, it is rare for any two games of Horus Heresy to be the same. It's stated that during playtesting it was found that most games were not decided until the fifth and final turn, making for an exciting and closely fought contest. The number of possible setups and strategies are endless and ensure that what works in one game is unlikely to do so in another. Your choice of strategy and combined with the luck of the dice will always decide the outcome of the campaign. Will you be able to emulate the Emperor, turn back the Chaos Hordes to save mankind, or can you do better than Warmaster Horus and in the process doom mankind to eternal slavery under the dark gods of chaos? The fate of the Imperium is in your hands. Now let's take a look at the board game itself. I'm a very, very lucky boy. I recently picked this up. It's in incredible condition, bearing in mind it was released in 1993, no less. The artwork is just iconic. I do find it slightly ironic that we've got Dark Angels on the front cover when they are actually a relief force, or they're part of the reinforcements and don't really have an active role in the Siege of Terra, or the Battle for Earth, as it is referred to at this point in the history. But it has got that absolutely epic rogue trader vibes. You can tell these guys are actually going through something. You've got the banners, you've got the different artwork on the pauldrons, and then obviously in the front and centre you've got a massive plasma cannon, and then you've got some what looks to be like maybe titans or burning buildings in the background. It's just absolutely iconic. I just absolutely love this. So taking a look inside the box. Now, one of the things that I find absolutely amazing about this box set is that, again, it appears to be complete and it is just absolutely just incredible, bearing in mind, you know, its age, the colours, it's just so iconic of that era of, you know, Warhammer 40k. As often the case with this era of Warhammer games, the first thing you'll see is quite a detailed section in terms of like where all the rules are, and it also gives, you know, credit to those who actually were involved with the game at the time. So obviously game design by Jervis Johnson, the campaign history by Bill King, the production Richard Hellawell, box cover Jim Burns, and then board art by a very familiar name, another familiar name, Dave Gallagher. So the book goes in and starts talking about the introduction of what the Horus Heresy is, and it kind of, we've already talked about it, but it's for those who haven't perhaps seen White Dwarf. They've bought the game, and this is kind of like the intro. It then lists the components, because obviously there's multiple components. Again, this is invaluable for people like me who are really interested in trying to collect old sets, so you can actually work out what you may be missing. And obviously the game board, which is just iconic in itself. You've got templates, and it talks about the counters. So here we've got the Imperial Guard 7th Terran, or the 7th Terran Army counter, and it talks about the attack value, which is 3, the defense value 4, and then the movement of 1, listing out the different strategy cards and the special cards that is available, and then the Horus Heresy reference sheet. So in terms of the game rules, there's a very kind of rigid structure to setting up the game, which I quite like. It basically talks about where the counters need to kind of go, so when you're setting up and what cards you might need. And the sequence of play, again, is actually very, very simple. You've got the strategy segment where both players secretly choose 2 strategy cards, and then you roll a dice. That's like the initiative roll off. I think this section here about stacking is also really crucial. It says that you may never have more than 3 counters in a stack. If you break the stacking rules and your opponent spots the mistake, then you must destroy enough counters to make the stack legal. Counters belonging to different chaos powers may stack together. However, there are some special counters which do not count against the stacking limit and may be included in a stack in addition to the 3 counters you are normally not allowed to do. So here it talks about the strategy segment and the fact that how you've got your cards and how you would use your cards and kind of how you would action them. And then the victory segment is actually very, very clear. So the traitor player wins by killing the Emperor or by capturing the Inner Palace and all 4 spaceports. Whereas the Imperial player wins by killing Horus and by controlling the Inner Palace and all 4 spaceports. And in the very unlikely situation of where both Horus and the Emperor are actually killed in the same turn, then the game is considered to be a draw. Now, it then goes into loads of detail about kind of the action phases, the movement phases. Movement is pretty self-explanatory. As previously mentioned, most of the counters have only got a movement of like 1 or possibly 2. So it's comparatively slow moving once you get on the board. However, when it comes to combat phases, this is actually quite different. So it's actually worked on combat ratios, which is something I hadn't ever come across before, and I think perhaps would be revisited if this was re-released in this day and age. So essentially what happens, you've got 2 stacks of counters, loyalist and traitor. The attacker adds up his counter's attacks value, the defender adds up his counter's defense value. Now, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So the 2 are converted to a ratio by dividing the attacker's total by the defender's total, rounding any fractions down. The ratio determines which column you use on the combat results table, which is shown here. So working out the odd ratios is stated. It might seem difficult at first, but you'll very quickly get the hang of it. Assume the attacker has 12 points and the defender has 4 points. 12 divided by 4 is 3, #quick math, and the odds ratio is 3 to 1. So something that's quite interesting is that if you kind of end up with a 2 to 1 ratio of attacker-defender, you're typically going to be getting attacker crushed, bloody stalemate, or a defender routed kind of result. But obviously if you're going into the extremes of like 7 to 1 when it's the attacker-defender, you're pretty much going to get a defender annihilated outcome. Equally, flip it around the other side. If you've got a very under strength counter, such as a standard Imperial Guard unit against, Horus, where the ratio is 1 to 4, chances are you are not going to do very well. Now, interestingly, that is the rules. What we've looked at is essentially how you play the game. The only thing that isn't actually kind of set out is that you've got some terrain effects in terms of which, how certain counters can interact with terrain. And then you've got the victory conditions setting out, again, how you actually win the game. So again, in terms of, it is very, very high level and very, very simple. Interestingly, kind of like from page 12 onwards is the article about setting the scene for Horus Heresy, which ironically is pretty much almost identical, is identical to the article shown in edition 161 White Dwarf. I mean, just look at this. These images are just absolutely iconic. This is peak kind of Warhammer for me. It's Rogue Trader, Heresy, 2nd edition 40k, I suppose. You've got the sofa speeders, you've got the overside heavy weapons, led by chaplains, and it's just absolutely fantastic. And then we've got the iconic standoff, Horus versus the Emperor, fighting over Sanguinius. So another section I quite like here is that we've got historical setup. So again, it is historical wargaming set in the future. So the map above shows the location of all the Imperial and traitor forces at the start of the battle for Earth. Horus used an elaborative and extremely effective deception to convince the Imperial defenders that his initial strike would be against Spaceport Primus, and the bulk of the defenders are set up to counter this anticipated attack. The actual target of the traitor invasion was the Eternity Wall Spaceport, as will readily become apparent if you study the locations of where the 4 Chaos Space Marine chapters have landed. And again, really, really simple. They've set out the Imperial setup instructions, what you need to do. Again, the traitor setup instructions. Again, really, really simple. Now, also included in the box are these Invasion Force setup cards. So these are just literally just card stock. And they basically set out where kind of everything would be set up as part of the game. So here you've got Big E and the Custodes, which are placed the Emperor and Custodes in the inner palace. You've then got bastion defense counters, so you would set them up in the appropriate bastions. And then you've got the Imperial Fist, you've got Rogel Dawn, and the 2 Imperial Fist setup counters must be placed in or adjacent to the Imperial Fist Fortress Monastery. You've also got some other big names in here. You've got Primarch Jagatai Khan, and you've also got Sanguinius. So you've actually got counters to actually depict these Primarchs in the actual game itself. In addition, you've actually got Adeptus Arbites, which are placed anywhere in the outer palace, subject to rules for stacking, and then you've got the Imperial tank regiments and whatnot. This is just really, really cool. When it comes to the invasion setup, you've actually got the invasion force setup itself, which includes Angron, Fulgrim, Magnus the Red, which is in blue, strangely, and then Mortarion. And then you've also got Horus, and then you've got the Traitor Guard counters as well. And then you've also got the battle cruiser setup, Sinch, Nurgle, Khorne, and Slaanesh. This is just, it's just amazing. You've got the high orbit area for the battle cruisers, and presumably what counters would be left up in reserve, inverted commas, available to Deep Strike. And then we've just got some of the awesome counters. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I mean, it's quite cool when you've got like Horus's counter. You've also got Big E, the Emperor, and the Custodes counters. You've got, again, different chapters. So the Imperial Fist Space Marine chapter. So they've got attack 11, defense 12, but movement 2. Whereas by comparison, you've got the Imperial Guard 11 tank or Terran army, who have got attack 2, defense 4, movement 1. Just so cool. Adeptus Arbites, attack 3, defense 6, movement 1. This is just absolutely amazing. We've also got some Chaos special cards. So these are essentially cards that can be used. So this card may be used to affect the battle. It includes 1 or more worshippers of Sinch. On a roll of 1 to 3, no effect. However, on a 4 to 6, 1 enemy counter is changed into a chaos spawn. The counter is eliminated, and you may add 1d6 to your combat value for this combat. That's really cool. We've also got the Imperial special cards. So this one here is the Imperial Terror tells that time is right to counterattack. This vital advice may allow you to change the course of the war. You may play this card at the start of any Imperial combat phase. For the rest of that phase, any attacks are shifted 1 column to the right of the combat results table, which I imagine would come in absolutely clutch. The Sons of Horus Chaos Space Marines are actually attack 13, defense 10, movement 2. So they're actually really, really good. So these are the strategy cards. So you've got the combat and movement and whatnot. And then last but not least, we've actually got the board itself. Now, if I'm honest, I don't think it's been very used historically, because it doesn't, when I got this out earlier, it doesn't actually fold flat, which would suggest it's never really been opened. Unfortunately, I'm a bit limited on space, but here you can see, so this is the kind of the southern end of the map. So you've got Fortress of Truth, Citadel of Justice, the Volcanus Factory Complex, Bastion Eternal, and on the right-hand corner, just here, you've got the Black Ministry. And I'm just going to carefully just flip this over so you guys can have a look at the other side. I think this is going to be upside down. No, we've got it the right way up. There we go. Look at that. So you've got the Crucible Factory Complex, the Tower of Shadows, Librarium Technologicus, and here we have the Inner Palace. So we've got the Inner Palace with Outer Palace areas surrounding, the Imperial Fists Fortress Monastery, and the Forbidden Fortress. And then lastly, we've got the Eternity Wall spaceport, the Lionsgate spaceport, and then we've got the Infernus factory complex. I just think this is just so iconic. It's so colourful. It's really vibrant. It's really interesting. And it's also really, really simple. I mean, if you take the math element of ratios and just look at it is for what it is, it's actually really quite an exciting little game to play. And lastly, I wanted to take a look at White Dwarf edition 161 from May 1993, which is the first time I believe that the Horus Heresy game is actually kind of showcased formally. Bearing in mind, this was back in the day before Google and all that kind of, social media and the internet. And this was the primary source of advertising and introducing new games to members of the public. So this actual edition of White Dwarf is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, just the photographs, again, are just iconic and just get all of the juices flowing. On the top left, we've got Deathwing Terminators battling against World Eater Chapter Space Marines. And then we've also got Goth and Bad Moon Orcs led by Gargant Big Mob. Now, this article, again, is insane. You've got some real big names. Obviously, the cover art was done by Dave Gallagher. We've got an article from Andy Chambers on Deathwing Terminators. Rick Priestley's talking about Chaos Dwarfs and the Chaos Dwarf Beastery. We've got an article of Manowar by a chap called Andy Jones. We've got Jervis Johnson and Bill King talking about Horus Heresy and Warmaster. And then we've got a heavy metal reference guide by Mike McVeigh. I mean, they are just absolute heroes. And equally, it was at the time when the editor was Robin Jews. I'm not going to go through the whole White Dwarf, but we've got an article here, Sea of Doom, Manowar, and I'm just like, this is just absolutely just the colours, the vibrancy. I just love how old the battle reports used to be done. Again, really, really simple, but done incredibly well. It's just, it gets all of the juices flowing. It's just fantastic. But we're here to talk about Heresy. So here is the article that I mentioned. Ironically, with the exception of kind of this first page, the rest of the article is actually repeated in the Horus Heresy rulebook. But the reason for me wanting to showcase this article is that it talks about a game called Warmaster. So this is actually, again, part of the Wargame series in terms of size and scale, where you need hundreds of miniatures, and it would kind of be played concurrently, alongside the Horus Heresy board game. So Warmaster is a two-player wargame that recreates the Emperor's attack on Horus's ship at the end of the Battle of Earth. At the start of the game, the Imperial player has no idea where Horus is located and must search his ship to find him as quickly as possible. Many hidden perils confront the Imperial attackers, who must battle their way through traps and ambushes as they search for the Warmaster. The Emperor does not have a moment to waste, for the longer the game goes on, the greater the number of the traitors that oppose the dwindling assault force. In a desperate race against time, the Emperor must find and defeat his arch-enemy or die in the attempt. This is just, again, really, really cool. So again, it uses counters as we've seen with the board game. Again, the sequence of play is very similar. We have got a reinforcements phase where you can essentially teleport onto the ship. Again, it's done on a D66 table. This is the actual ship itself. So this is in terms of what the ship looks like. This is what you would be essentially fighting over, and you've got various different areas of the Warmaster's ship. You've got the engines, fighter squadron decks, engine rooms, gun batteries, cargo, weapon store, crew, shields, torpedoes, and then you've obviously got the bridge as well. Again, it uses combat ratios, which we've already talked about, and then we've also got counters. You're actually encouraged in the article to actually carefully cut out all of these different counters to use in your games of Warmaster. Now, back in the day, how much was the article? How much is it going to cost you? £2.25. Even then I'd be questioning whether I'd actually want to cut these out. But equally, you tell me, how easy would it be to go to a copy shop and get these printed out? Chances are, you're of that age where you're going to get your scissors out and cut them really badly, and then essentially deface the article for us old grognards 20, 30 years later. Thankfully, this edition was actually very kindly given to me by a good friend, Josh. And it's just very, very fortuitous that finally I was able to get a copy of Horus Heresy and review the Warmaster article at the same time. So once again, you've got a variety of counters. You've got the Emperor, you've got Sanguinius, you've also got Dawn and General Kane. When it comes to traitor counters, you've got the Warmaster, Angron and Magnus. So again, it's a Primarch heavy game. You've got 2 greater demons. You've got Doombreed and Kraxnar. When it comes to demonic hordes, interestingly, it's only showing Slaanesh and Khorne. And interestingly, you actually roll for their combat values, so it's kind of varying. So rather than being fixed, that's quite interesting. You've got trap counters, horror counters, and then you've also got crew counters and crew ambush. So it's actually really quite interesting. It is another game. It's not like replicating the box game in space. It's actually its own game in its own right. And I dare say it's probably kind of got a little bit more flavour, even though it's going to be kind of character based. And then also what I find quite interesting is you've got special ship locations. So when it comes to the bridge, that actually affects in terms of how movement works. So for example, if you control the bridge, you can move 3 rather than just 1. In the engine room, if you roll, a stray shot can actually cause an explosion. Which is really what's quite actually interesting is that the engines, you can't voluntarily move into the engine room. If you do, if you teleport in there, you are actually counted as destroyed, which is really brutal. It's just really, really a fun little mini micro game. What I think I might do is actually 3D print some of these tokens and actually give the game a go. I can't finish this or come towards the end of this video without mentioning these epic adverts that you used to get for shop opening on the opening days, where you would get 10% or up to 25% off any Games Workshop or Citadel product. Admittedly, you can't stack these, but when you think about it, that you can buy any 2 blister packs at £3.99 and then get an additional one for free. You had the red and yellow dot items, which again is just absolutely amazing. So for example, you could buy Warhammer 40,000 and Space Hulk and get the Warhammer 40,000 battle manual for free. Just, oh God, can you imagine them doing that nowadays? Oh, just amazing. Oh, I can't go past, again, some more awesome looking models. The Marauder Giant, some of the Bretonnian and Elf ships from Man O' War. And then there's an article, Space Marine Gargants by Andy Chambers. Again, just look, it's just so good. It's so good. Oh no, we're going to go to the back and just see some of the prices. Let's have a look at some of the prices. Okay, so a box of Warhammer, what would be 4th edition, would cost you £30. The Battle Magic box would come in at £18, and then you have army boxes for High Elves, Empire, and Orcs and Goblins coming in at £10. The Marauder Giant was actually quite expensive back in the day at £20, although I would definitely pay £20 for one now. Again, the Chaos Dwarves, the Dwarves players, be ready for this. So a Command is 165, Axemen 135 each, Dwarf of Blunderbuss £1.35 each, Centaurs £3.99 each, and then the Chaos Dwarf Lord riding Great Taurus is £14.99. They're actually selling tickets for Golden Demon, which are actually Golden Demon 1993, so they're £5 each. So tickets were available from Games Workshop stores or post free from Games Workshop mail order. Also, we're going to be looking at Warhammer 40,000. So the box game was £15. The vehicle manual was £13. Battle manual was £12. The compilation £10, and then the compendium was £12. Deathwing Terminators at £3 each. The Deathwing Terminator box set was £13. Manowar, £25 for a box set. Oh, those were the days. Space Marine was going to set you back £30. Armies of the Imperium, £15. Oh, this is just absolutely insane. Yeah, just incredible, just incredible. And then you get all the parts, and you could order individual parts, and see the models and get a real good size of, get a real good view of like what the models are going to look like and how they go together, rather than just seeing a sprue just laid down. Here's the Marauder Giants, just fantastic bit of kit. Again, you've got the Terminators, some of the Manowar bits and bobs. It's just fantastic, isn't it? And then we end with a iconic High Elf army battles against a Chaos Dwarf warband. Again, you've got the classic river going through the centre, the bridge, which invariably was never wide enough for the unit trying to cross them. Taking advantage of the terracing effect on the terrain for the cannons. It's just with the iconic background. This is just amazing. Thank you for watching. I hope you found the video interesting and informative. Please let me know in the comments below if you'd even seen the Horus Heresy board game, or if it's a game that you've played historically and really enjoyed. I really love to hear from you. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.